Welcome back to the Middle of Culture. I'm one of your hosts, Eden.
And I am one of your other hosts, Peter. In fact, I'm the other host. I don't know that there's more than one other host. I don't know why I said that.
There's the ghost, Jeremy, but Jeremy doesn't ever speak.
Bastard.
Look, he's been leaving us hanging a lot. There's more than once where we're like, hey, what do you think, Jeremy? And then there's 12 minutes of dead air that we cut so that you, listener, don't have to hit forward on your podcast platform of choice for 12 minutes. Or if you're using Overcast, it would just cut that out for you since it has the the empty silence removal. But not everyone's using Overcast, so.
That's true. We can't count on that,
So Jeremy just gets cut. Jeremy, start talking.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see.
Anyway, what you been up to?
Just kind of sort of work and stuff. This week, as I was mentioning to you before we started recording, Alyssa was out in Wisconsin helping kids get moved in. And so it was kind of Gareth and I hanging out this week and just sort of usual. I had a lot of teaching going on the last couple of weeks. I mean, a lot for me, which just means that on a week ago, this past Thursday, I had to give a presentation / lecture to the family medicine residency. And then this last Friday morning, from 8 until 11, I was lecturing at the PA school. And so had it was a little different, It was kind of nice to mix things up a bit. So, but what about you? What you been up to?
Working. It's been a busy few weeks at work. But we're making it happen. We're doing things. We just got back from Minneapolis. And what we were doing in Minneapolis, let me send the pictures. We were at the pencil sharpening, which I have just sent pictures to your phone of the pencil sharpening.
The pencil sharpening.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's
a big pencil.
It's a very big pencil. It's a 20-foot tall pencil. What happened was a few years ago, a very, very old oak tree, like 150, 200-year-old oak tree, got blown over in the wind, except for the base, the very middle trunk of it. And the folks who owned this house up in Minneapolis didn't know what to do with it. They were thinking they would just remove it, but the neighborhood kind of came together and was like, let's figure out something fun to do with this. So they had a sculptor, I guess he's a famous guy. I can't think of his name right now, but he's kind of a famous guy, turn this big trunk into a 20-foot tall pencil. So it is exactly what it looks like, dear listeners. It is a huge pencil, says on it that it's a number 2 pencil, has on the bottom the brass bit and then the eraser, and that is where it attaches to the ground. And so every year, as you can see in that first picture, the top is very dull. And so every year they have the sharpening, which is when they have a big party in their neighborhood. There was over 1,500 people there.
Holy cow.
Yeah. They, gave out T-shirts and pencils and had a bunch of stupid skits and had a DJ there playing music. And then the pièce de résistance was they have this enormous pencil sharpener that they hoist up there in this big, scaffold and plop it on top and sharpen the top of the pencil. It is fictitious sharpening. Unfortunately, Cassi was really hopeful that it was an actual, like they're carving the wood down, but no, they just put a pointy tip on top of it. But it was very fun. It was a wild party to go to. And then we swung by again this morning, hoping that they had taken down the scaffolding, and we got there right as they had finished taking it down. And so the owner of the house was outside, and we stopped and kind of chatted with him for a little bit about the party and how we had come, and it was really fun. And then Cassi went up and took pictures with the pencil, which was nice. Delightful. Yeah, so that's awesome. What I've been up to. Driving up to Minneapolis in order to watch a fake pencil get fake sharpened.
So how did you guys find out about this?
I don't know. Cassi saw it on social media somewhere, I think, and she was like, I really want to go to this. And we were like, okay, let's make it happen. So we did.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
She's already making plans about how she wants to cosplay next year as some sort of pencil and or office supply related accoutrement. There were a bunch of people in costume in various and sundry ways. You know, there was a family that were all colored pencils. So they were wearing like conical party hats that had been, you know, turned inside out and colored to look like different types of colored pencil. And then they were wearing shirts in whatever matched the color of their party cap. So, you know, there was like the dad was wearing a red cap with a red shirt, and the kids were wearing like a purple cap and purple shirt, or orange cap and orange shirt. So they were colored pencils. Lots of people wearing other types of party hats that look like pencils. People wearing whole pencil costumes.
Sure.
Lots of closet cosplay of pencils. So like evoking the colors, like wearing a pink hat and then a yellow shirt, or things like that to try to evoke pencils. But it was fun. We went up there. We went to the sculpture garden, the sculpture museum, the sculpture garden, bunch of outside cool sculpture stuff. Just kind of hung out, went to a couple stores, woke up this morning, ate some breakfast, came home.
Cool.
But yeah, so pop culture wise, what you been up to? You been checking out anything fun?
Yeah. So I was making a list and I thought to myself, oh, I'm not going to have much to talk about. And then by the time it was all said and done, I thought to myself, oh, I have a lot to talk about. Let's see. Let's start with music and get that out of the way because, you know, that's a thing that means a lot to me, but I don't know how many people that may be listening care as much about the new music releases. So there's a few that are worth mentioning. This last Friday, so just 2 days ago, the latest album from Katatonia came out. Now I like Katatonia, but I will admit that their last couple of albums have been a little less engaging for me. This is the first Katatonia album in which the guitarist, I think I'm getting his name right, Anders Nystrom, is no longer in the band. He and Jonas Renski, it kind of sounds like from a few things I've read that they were a little bit on their way towards Splitsville, and this was one where they have officially split. So it's some new guitar players, and there's maybe a little bit more energy. Maybe riffs have a little bit more punch to them, but I have not had a ton of time to listen to it. So I don't have any, my judgment, I'm going to reserve judgment a little bit until I've had a chance to listen to it some more. The week before that, though, we had a couple other new albums. The latest album from Rivers of Nihil came out, and I'm conflicted. So instantly, I was more into it than I have been because one of the members of Black Crown Initiate joined Rivers of Nihil a few years ago. And this is the first album that he is on. And so it feels a little bit more similar to Black Crown Initiate, which I love. I really, really love Black Crown Initiate sound. And so all of a sudden I'm into Rivers of Nihil, and then and I know there's a lot of people who disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's okay. But then they commit the cardinal sin, and they bring in a saxophone, and they bring in the saxophone more than once. And I try and get past it. And then all of a sudden I'll just be like, I can't, just fuck this. And then I have to go and listen to something else because I really, really hate the way that saxophone sounds. But, you know, it's made me go back and listen to a lot more Black Crown Initiate because I think to myself, you know what sounds really a lot like this, but doesn't have any saxophone? That would be all 4 Black Crown Initiate albums. So I've been checking them out a lot. And then the other one that came out is the latest album from Vildhjarta. I am not going to try and pronounce the name because it's a ridiculous name that I would just butcher. But I like Vildhjarta a lot. Vildhjarta's first full album, Masteden, came out in like 2011. And then there was an EP that came out a few years later. And then they didn't put out another album until it was like either 2021 or 2022. And so we only had a couple year break before this one came out. It is interesting. It is heavy. They very much embraced the super low down-tuned guitar sort of sound that Meshuggah, kind of pioneered a lot, but Vildhjarta does their own thing. They don't sound like they're trying to copy Meshuggah, which I appreciate. And it's a lot more adventurous. It is an album that you don't really listen to casually because there is a lot going on. But it is a lot of fun, and I am enjoying Vildhjarta. In terms of books, not a lot. I read a little bit more of Wind and Truth. I'm just slowly picking away at that mammoth book. And then some nonfiction stuff that I don't really think is worth mentioning. A couple other things, though, that I definitely want to bring up. Gaming-wise, you know what's a fun game, Eden? Mario Kart.
Did you get a new Switch?
I was going to say, and you know what's actually a really, really good version of that? That would be Mario Kart World. It's great. It is a ton of fun. It looks great. It plays well. It is chaotic as can be because now that we have a Switch 2 that has a little more juice, the races all have 24 people in them. So you've got 24 people firing off blue shells and red shells and green shells. And it is madness. Especially, on those Grand Prix, there's just stuff going off all of the time. But it's a ton of fun. And the free roam mode is kind of cool. You can just drive around this massive open world and encounter the different tracks, but there's lots of places off the tracks that you can drive. And there's little missions, little things to do off the tracks. Haven't done a ton of the free roam stuff. I mean, the game only came out on Thursday. But I will say I was not planning on getting a Switch 2. I had not even bothered attempting to pre-order it. And then while I was at work in the middle of surgeries on Thursday, a friend sent me a picture of a display thing at Costco and said, hey, they still have a few Switch 2s. Do you want me to grab you one? And I thought to myself, why the hell not? So I had him grab me a Switch 2 and we got it set up. It's definitely bigger than the original Switch. The screen looks pretty nice. It doesn't look as good as the OLED Switch, but it's a bigger screen. And I will say that the Joy-Cons attach in a much more pleasant way, but they are still criminally small for adult hands. And so you're not going to want to play that thing with the attached controllers very much, in my personal opinion. The one thing, though, I do want to say about this, I want to say that I listened to a few podcasts. Some of them are gaming related. One in particular, NPC, Next Portable Console, and I think I may have mentioned them previously. But I'm going to say this and then leave it at that. I think that the Nintendo reality distortion field may be even more powerful than the Apple reality distortion field. Like, people who just are Nintendo fans, I mean, they will, I don't know. I mean, they were just talking about how incredible this was and they were so excited and all this kind of stuff. And I sat there thinking, yeah, it's a fun version of Mario Kart, but if I was traveling, I'll tell you what I sure as crap wouldn't take with me would be my Switch 2 right now. I got way more good stuff to play on my Steam Deck or any of the other handhelds I have. I don't know. And maybe it's because we didn't really grow up with Nintendo because, we had Nintendo at home, AKA the Atari 5200 that our parents had gotten on closeout. But I listen to people talk about their excitement for Nintendo and for this Switch 2 and stuff. And I think we don't love the same things or something. I don't know what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't, because I have also heard people talk very little. I know one person IRL besides you who has a Switch 2. And I don't listen to a whole lot of gaming podcasts these days. And what few I do are not the kind of people who are going to be buying a Switch 2. But I look at it and I'm just like, okay, yeah, I bet Mario Kart is good. What else you got? Do you got anything of interest to me? And the answer to that is, I think, unfortunately, no. And that might change in the future, but also I could just save that money.
And I think that that's super fair. I recognize I am in a position of privilege where I can look at it and say, yeah, I'm happy to spend that money so that, especially when my adult kids come up and visit. We love to play Mario Kart or, Boomerang Fu, any of those. The Switch that's when we play the Switch the most, is when I have my adult children around and we turn it on and we play stuff there. And so for me, I thought, yep, that's worth it to get it for that. But there's not a lot else. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that going forward. Few other things worth mentioning. I did go on Memorial Day and took the gamble, and while on call, went to see Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And the call gods smiled on me. I got 0 phone calls, never had to leave, except at one point to go and take a leak because it's a long ass movie. But I can definitely see what I think you had mentioned last time we were talking, where people have referred to it as both the best, simultaneously the best and worst Mission Impossible movie. There are some action scenes in it that are absolutely incredible, that are breathtaking. But at the same time, there's some parts that are a little slow. And more than anything, it just takes itself too seriously. Like, it really is set up as Tom Cruise is the savior of mankind, and doesn't have some of the fun aspects and some of the subterfuge. This is just more like big action set pieces. There's not nearly, there's not a lot of fun stuff with the disguises and the masks and those sorts of things that a lot of times make the Mission Impossible movies a ton of fun. And so spectacle, yes, substance, not as much as some others, but definitely fun. And I'm glad that we saw it.
Cool. Well, I'm glad. I still have not seen Dead Reckoning, so I obviously can't go see Final Reckoning until I see Dead Reckoning.
You totally could. That's why it's a little slow at first, is because the first 45 minutes is basically catching you up. So Alyssa had not seen Dead Reckoning. Alyssa had not seen Dead Reckoning at all and felt she was fine watching it. But yes, that's a fair thing. One final thing. Anything else you wanted to say about Mission Impossible before I share my final thing?
No, by all means. Go ahead.
Okay. So, are you familiar with the game show Taskmaster from the UK?
I am. My wife went through a period where she was watching quite a bit of that.
So, here's the beautiful thing. In the US, Taskmaster is just on YouTube. And so
she's
you can
watched
just watch
a lot of it on YouTube. Yeah.
Exactly. You watch all the series on YouTube. I had heard a lot about it and have watched a little bit. I'd seen the whole first series, which I think was 6 or 7 episodes, and had seen a few episodes of series 2, and then had not gone back to it. But on a podcast I was recently listening to, they mentioned that US actor / comedian Jason Mantzoukas was on this series. And apparently he called up Greg and Alex, the 2 guys who are in charge of it, and literally just said, I really, really would like to be on this. I will fly myself out there. Can I be on the show? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And now, I don't know. I'm not terribly familiar with Jason Mantzoukas. The only things where I would say I am really familiar with him is both as the character of Dennis Feinstein in Parks and Rec, where he's the scumbag fragrance mogul who shows up in a few episodes, and then as the recurring character Adrian Pimento in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the detective who is in deep cover with the mob for a number of years and has been significantly scarred from that experience and is kind of psychotic. He plays that sort of absolute maniac to perfection in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I thought it would be interesting to see, is he like that on this? And the answer is yes. Yes, he is. He brings an absolutely maniacal energy to the show. And it is hilarious. At one point, Greg, in one of the episodes, said something about, you started off so nice and it took very little for me to worry that you're a serial killer. But I will say it is a ton of fun. So series 19 with Jason Mantzoukas on there, amongst others, is really, really enjoyable. And I am loving watching that show.
That's good to know. Yeah, Cass fell off of watching it, but I know she was quite into it for quite a while.
Yeah, like I say, this most recent season is clicking with me a lot more than the first few that I watched, but definitely worth watching. It is funny. What about you? What you been checking out?
So I have a few things to mention. First off, I told you, I think a few weeks ago, that I was going to get a room box and put together a dollhouse room, correct? Did we talk about this?
I can't remember.
Well, I had become enamored with dollhouse furniture because I think that miniatures are interesting and I really like them. And so I started getting a couple of pieces of dollhouse furniture to just like put model kits on, because like the thing about dollhouses is that a lot of times they have terrible like figures in them that are like stationary or immobile. But you know what's really highly easily posable? A Gundam model kit. And so I started putting different model kits that I had built in funny ways on furniture and things like that. And then eventually that turned into me having a desire to build a room box, which is a single room model kit. See, I'm sending you a picture of a GP, a Gundam GM #1 lounging on a sofa.
Yes, I love it.
And so I was like, I want to put together an entire room box, which is essentially, instead of doing a whole doll house, you're doing a single room of a doll house. And so I finally finished that up. The only thing that are left to do is to attach the clock and pictures to the walls. But as you can see, I've put together an entire little room. It's got 2 different types of flooring. It's got 2 different types of walls. It's got 2 different types of windows. There's a bunch of furniture of different types and all these sorts of things kind of coexisting. And all I have left to do is attach some things to the wall and then getting some model kits in there and getting them posed. And that was a larger process than I expected. It took a little bit longer than I expected it to, but it was really fun. And I had a lot of fun making it. And I think it's come together quite nicely. But there was a lot of
cool looking for sure.
It was a lot of learning curve about like, okay, this thing has pieces that I've got to figure out how to glue together to make these frames for these windows, or how do I do baseboards? Oh, they have baseboards. I guess I need to figure out how to cut them down and make them, nest with one another, because the thing is, I can take this apart. Like, this is able to be taken apart and laying flat again. So I had to figure out how to make sure that the baseboards could do that too. I didn't want them to all be attached to each other, so I couldn't do that if I needed to. But I think it's come together really nicely, and it's been a fun project to work on for the last couple of weeks. Cassie was out of town recently, and that was a real big impetus, because when she's out of town and I have nothing to do, I get to work on projects. So I did a lot of work finishing that up while Cass was out of town. And then let's see what else is worth mentioning. So I went and saw an absolutely terrible movie. Have you ever heard of the movie White Fire?
No, I have not. Should I have?
No, probably not. It's a terrible exploitation movie from the 70s. But as part of the Grindhouse series of films at the local like art house cinema, they were showing this film. It is a film that a number of friends of mine are big fans of. It was technically their copy of the film we were watching, because we were going on a night that the gimmick is they put an actual VHS in and then just project the VHS in the theater. And it was their VHS copy of White Fire we were watching. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. But it was so much fun to be in this room of people who were excited to watch a terrible movie. And there was a drinking game where every time they either said the word or the theme song played and sang the words White Fire again, you would have to take a sip. And it had to be a sip. You could not take like a shot every time they said it, or you would die of alcohol poisoning. They say that phrase so many times. I was out of beverage halfway through the movie, and I was like, the drinking game stipulates I should go buy another, but I think I'm good, actually. I will not be doing great tomorrow. I have to go to work tomorrow. But it was fun to watch a very bad movie in a communal experience like that. And so, even when it's a bad movie, it's fun when you're watching it with a bunch of people who are excited to watch a bad one.
I mean, I'm watching, I'm on the IMDb page, and they've got this like supercut pseudo trailer thing going. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't know. Do I want to watch this movie?
You do not want to watch this movie. You don't want to watch this movie. You could watch so many better exploitation movies. Don't watch Wi-Fi.
All right. Well, like I say, I'm sitting here watching it and I'm intrigued. So I'm going to take your word for it.
Don't. All right. Some other things to mention. I have to do the now traditional Adachi and Shimamura catch up. I'm done with the 11 volumes that have been published so far. Volume 12 is due out in October. So I'm all caught up for now. And the thing that's interesting, and I maybe have mentioned this previously, but the thing I think is most interesting about this series is that technically book 8 is the last book, canonically. Okay. And then everything since has just been gravy, because the author specifically said, I wrote it as if book 8 was the last book, and then I just kept wanting to write more. But book 8's the last book, and you're fine if you wanted to stop after book 8. Everything else is just like weird building off of ideas that I had. There's a lot of messing with temporal stuff now, lots of like flash forward, flash back, now they're 27, now they're 7, and like seeing them in different stages of their lives and all these sorts of things. And I just really find it delightful how much this author is able to wring like interest and story out of a thing that he himself says he finished already. But it's really, really fun. There is, however, a new book that is out before volume 12, and that is Adachi and Shimamura, volume 99.9. And you might be asking yourself, what does that mean? And this is the summary. This just came out. I have not read this yet, but it came out last week. As Adachi and Shimamura share life as adults, they've never been happier. Their relationship's so close now, it may last into their golden years, maybe even for the next 3,700 years, in fact. Just how long can the pair stay the course together, follow the galactic trajectory of their romance in this short story compilation? Because as I have mentioned, there is this weird undercurrent of sci-fi in this story about these two high school kids falling in love with each other. And apparently this one cranks that to 100, because now it is 3,700 years in the future. What happens when you've been with one person for 3,700 years? I
don't know. That's a long time.
How do you maintain a relationship in that way? Anyway, I am very curious, and I'm excited to read it, but I haven't gotten to it yet because I have also been reading The Apothecary Diaries. Are you familiar with, or have you heard of The Apothecary Diaries at all?
Sounds familiar, but I do not know.
So it's a novel series. There's also a manga and a fairly well-regarded anime that just finished its second season recently. I've not watched the anime or read the manga, but I had a friend, volume 14 of the books just came out, and I had a friend who was really, really into them and recommended them to me. And I finished the first book, and I'm partway through the second book, and I got to tell you, they are really entertaining books. It is set in a kind of fictionalized China, kind of melange of the Ming and Tang dynasty, kind of mixed between the two, and is about this young apothecary Mao Mao who basically gets sold into service as in like the rear palace where the consorts and concubines of the emperor live, and she tries to just like be as ignorant appearing as possible, as unassuming as possible, so that she can work for a couple years and then get back out. But she can't leave well enough alone, and realizes that her knowledge as an apothecary could, save the lives of the sick prince and princess who were doted upon by their consort parents. And so tries to do so anonymously. Things are found out, and eventually it comes to the attention of like basically the administrator of the rear palace where all the consorts live, that she has these skills and this knowledge, and he puts her to work. And then the rest of the book is her basically Sherlock Holmesing her way through fantasy, or not fantasy, but like, China with the serial numbers filed off. And they're really fun. It's a really fun series. Mao Mao, the main character, is a delight. I've really, fallen for her as a main character. I've really enjoyed reading her her story so far, and I am excited to read more of it. So if you want a really light, fun read that still deals with some like interesting, weightier topics, it's by far more, way less flighty and nothing happens than like Adachi and Shimamura has been. This feels a lot more, there's a lot more portent because it's dealing with a lot of imperial intrigue and, backstabbing plots between the different types of the different consorts and all those sorts of things. But it's really been delightful. I've been having a really fun time with it.
Awesome.
And the last thing I will mention, mostly just because I am disappointed, there is a game that I'd had on my wish list for a while, and it has mostly negative reviews on Steam. But a friend of mine had said it's quite fun, and the concept seems quite fun. And that is Synduality Echo of Ada, which is an extraction shooter based on the Synduality, multimedia project. There's like an anime. I think there's a manga too. But basically, it is set in this world hundreds of years in the future where bad stuff is broken down, and you are a pilot of this mech called a cradle coffin, which is such a cool name for a mech. And you are basically tasked with working with this AI, this Magus, which is the AI kind of entity that works with you in order to go out and collect materials, get resources, and do the kind of things that you do in an extraction shooter in order to improve your mech. And I was like, I'll buy it when it's on sale. It was on sale. I installed it, I started playing it, and I couldn't get the graphics to load in right. The textures wouldn't load. Even though I had the settings quite high and I tried to troubleshoot a bunch of stuff, the textures just wouldn't load in. So I was like, well, I'm interested enough that if this was working, I would keep playing, but the fact that it's not working and I'm still within the 2-hour window, uninstall and refund, please.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Synduality is good or not.
A surprising number of the user reviews are talking about how they requested a refund. So
I wanted to like it. My friend says it's very good, but like I'm not going to play a game where the textures don't load in because it looks like garbage.
No, definitely.
But oh well, I tried.
Well, that's too bad. Too bad.
It is. But I guess we should, speaking of trying to do things and maybe failing at it, we should move on to our topic of the day. And,
let's do it.
A couple of weeks ago when we had recorded our last episode, Peter and I were talking afterwards. He was like, a friend of mine mentioned maybe we should watch this like animated movie from the 80s. It's not supposed to be very good, but it kind of looks cool. And I was like, okay, maybe we should do that. But then I thought to myself, should I watch an animated movie from the 80s that's supposedly not very good but kind of looks cool? Or should I watch a movie that I've been meaning to watch for years and years and is supposed to be a stone cold banger? And so I said, I think we should watch a stone cold banger. And dear listeners, we did watch a stone cold banger because we watched 1974's The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Peter, were you familiar with this film at all before I suggested it?
No, I mean, obviously there was the 2009 version that came out with Denzel Washington and I think John Travolta.
Indeed.
I'd never watched it or anything, but because of that, I knew I was familiar with the name. I sort of somehow in the back of my head knew that 2009 was a remake. What I didn't know is that they were all based off a book that came out, honestly, only like 2 years before the first movie came out. And I did not know that there was a made-for-TV version with Edward James Olmos that came out sometime in the 80s or 90s. I think 90s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But no, I was familiar with the 2009 version in that I knew it existed, and that is the extent of it.
Okay. Yeah, I also did not know about that 98 TV movie version with Edward James Olmos and Vincent D'Onofrio, but I saw that and Donnie Wahlberg, but I saw that existed as I was like opening the Wikipedia page for the 74 film today, and I thought to myself, damn, you know what? I'd probably watch a 1998 made-for-TV version of Taking of Pelham 1-2 Free, starring Edward James Olmos and Vincent D'Onofrio. Because honestly, you know what I'd probably also watch is the 2009 version, because this movie fucking slaps, man. This movie was really good.
All right.
What did you think?
I did not think that.
Your response is maybe making me think you didn't care for this movie very much, Peter.
It was fine. It was fine.
Tell me more. Why did you think it was just fine?
Oh, so let's just put this out there right from the beginning. I recognize that this movie was made in 1973, released in 1974. But fuck me with a fork sideways if this thing is not just drenched in misogyny and racism.
Oh, yeah.
It was so casual that it was off-putting to me. And I realize, again, it's just like old episodes of Looney Tunes where they, put the thing up on front. And I get it. I understand it was a product of its time. But again, the misogyny and the racism was just so permeating that I almost could not get past that. And every moment I'm watching this movie and I would start to get a little bit into it, then something else would come around about, a dame in the police force, a broad, or, the white dude using the N-word to the guy on the bus. And, just so many different things where I'm just like, that it just kept pushing me away. That was the first part. The second part, I thought it was boring. Like, I appreciate, so I have not seen, I thought to myself, well, I wonder if I watched the 2009 version. I'd like to see what that was like. And then I read some commentary and some reviews about it. And it looks like universally the complaint was that it went too far the other way. It went too actiony, too over the top kind of spectacle sort of thing. And that's not what this movie needs. This movie, I think, here's the thing. I kept waiting for it to build the tension because it's staying fairly small and contained, and it's mostly the people on the train, and it's mostly the people in Central Command, and it's not too big. There's not too much going on, but it just the tension never built the way I kept hoping that it would. And so I was kind of yawning through a lot of the movie. And I don't know if it's the different sensibilities of when this was made versus now, or if it was, I'll be honest, I haven't been sleeping great the last week. So I was really, really tired when I was watching this yesterday. But I could see a potential for this movie to get really tense and build some really good tension. And for me, it never did. It just felt like it was flirting with it, but it didn't want to commit.
Interesting. I was captivated by this thing. I was watching it and I was just like, man, the 70s. I know, like you said, the sexism, the racism, don't love it. But the way that films are shot, the way that they're lit, the way that, the thing is constructed, I felt like it was electric. I loved this movie. I had such a good time watching this movie. I took almost no notes because I just wanted to see the thing. I didn't want to take my eyes away from it because I was just like, this is so good. So I think it's really interesting how different our responses were to it.
Well, and I love that because it's really fascinating. I didn't take a lot of notes on it because I was so turned off by some things. Literally the last note I took is the mayor can fucking suck shit.
The mayor
and then
sucks,
I just stopped. And then I just stopped. Then I just didn't take any more notes. And it was, that's, again, tell me more. Well, I don't want to take over. But I'm fascinated to hear your point of view on this because I felt like all of the pieces were there for it to be a riveting show, but they never came together for me.
Huh. That's so interesting to me. I really felt like I don't know, the pieces just worked for me. I felt like I feel like Walter Matthau is such an electric presence on the screen, even when he's being such a cad. Like at the beginning when he is being so racist to those Japanese dudes because he doesn't think they speak English, and then they turn to him and all respond to him in English as they walk away, and he's just like, fuck me running, what did I just do?
Yep.
And I don't know, I just thought that Matthau is incredible. I really felt like Robert Shaw was so menacing as Mr. Blue. I thought that the idea of how do you take hostage and then release a train full of people and somehow think you're going to get away with the money, and then they almost do it. That's the most interesting part, is they almost got away with it. And then they don't. And everybody gets caught in the end. And I think that was just like an extremely satisfying way for it to end. I've looked a little bit into the 2009 remake, which obviously has to take things in a very different way because the internet exists in 2009. And the plot of this movie as it stands does not work in a world where the internet exists.
No, I mean, you can't have cell phones and the internet and webcams in your laptop and, and again, this would have been 2009 is very, very early in the smartphone era. But even then people had cell phones with cameras in them, even though they're potato quality. But they've had this for a few years at this time. And so, yeah, it complicates it. I mean, so much of what makes this movie work is the fact that the only things they can know in central control or command or whatever they call it, the only thing that Walter Matthau and all those people can know and understand is either train's moving or train's not moving. And then anything that they're told over the phone / walkie-talkie, the communication, that's it. That's all they can know. And because of that, again, there's a lot of opportunity to create this really tense situation where neither party really can know. And there has to be some degree of trust. And clearly they don't trust each other, but they don't have a choice. I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead if you want to do like a recap or something, but
sure.
There's a moment where the money's not going to get there on time. And all of a sudden it dawns on Walter Matthau, well, they don't know that. They don't know that. So he just gets on, he's like, boom. He's like, oh, money's here with like 30 seconds to spare, even though it's not, because there's no way that the guys down in the subway can know that. And they have to trust him, just like, quite honestly, he has to trust that they haven't already killed people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm going to do a quick synopsis for folks who maybe haven't seen the film and who are curious about that, and then we can talk about more specifics. But, as we said, this is about hijacking a car full of people in the subway and then ransoming them for $1 million. So there are 4 people, are hijackers, who are Mr. Blue, Mr. Green, Mr. Gray, and Mr. Brown. They're all going by aliases. Obviously, this is where Tarantino gets the idea for the Mr. Color people in Reservoir Dogs. And maybe that's part of why I like this movie, is I see the ways in which later movies engage with it. But we could talk about that at the end. The 4 color men get onto the train, are able to, get to the front car, detach the front car from the rest of the train, pull it forward, stop it, and then they demand that $1 million be delivered in exactly 1 hour, or they will kill 1 hostage for every minute it's late. Eventually it comes to light who these people kind of are. Mr. Blue was a former, army colonel in the British Army and was a mercenary in Africa. Mr. Green was a former driver of the subways, but was caught in a drug bust. Mr. Gray was from the mafia. And, we don't really find out much more about Mr. Brown. He's the least important of the four. But
we get a few cheap laughs because it's the 1970s and we get to laugh at the fact that he has a stutter.
Okay. Yeah, he does have a stutter and they do laugh. You do laugh at it.
I mean, I didn't, but they make sure that people on the train do.
Yeah, that's true. And it is the people who are trapped on the train could not be a more like, let's do a, sampling of characters who could possibly be on this train. So we've got like, a drug dealing brother who can also speak Spanish to the one only Spanish speaking lady who is on there. We've got a sex worker on there. We've got a mom and her 2 kids on there. We've got like an old German man or an old Polish man who's like, the train will be fine. We've got these 2 like co-eds who are like hippy dippy and like just like doing yoga to try to save them all and things or like meditation and things like that. So it's a really
literally
interesting
chanting
cross-section.
At the end.
Yeah, they're doing alms. It's very, very over the top.
Don't forget the old lady with the bottle of liquor in her thing who sleeps through the entire thing.
Yes, we've got a lady who is such a lush that she sleeps through all of this, including multiple gunshots, everything going on, the train going too fast. All these sorts of things are happening. So these are the 4 guys who are doing the heist. As Peter mentioned, on the other side, we've got Walter Matthau, who is kind of the head cop, who's one of the transit cops. His name's Zachary Garber, and he is the one who is on the horn, on the microphone with these guys as they are asking for this ransom. And he's the one who's trying to figure out, okay, they're asking for this $1 million. They've got guns. We bring them this $1 million. Where do they go? They're on a train. It's underground. It's not like a plane where they could take it off and go somewhere. It's not like a car. It's a freaking train. It goes on the tracks under the ground. But he's trying to solve all these sorts of things. As Peter said, there are many mishaps trying to get the money there. The scumbag mayor finally decides to just pay it. Because, and this is, as you said, the mayor is such a sleazeball. He is super unpopular. Everybody hates his guts. And so what is it that finally convinces him to have the money pay the ransom? Well, that's 18 more votes in your re-election campaign than you would have otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough for him to be like, okay, $1 million.
And again, just to point out, like, the interesting choices were being made that makes me go, I wonder if I understood better the politics of New York in the late 60s and the 70s, if this character would have more impact, or if the author of the book was trying to say something with this. We literally see the mayor the first time. He's got the flu. He's in bed, blowing his nose, and then literally just chucking these snot rags anywhere. And he gets interrupted by, I think he refers to him as the deputy mayor or whoever, because this hijacking has gone on, and he's pissed because he missed the end of the Newlywed Game.
Yep. That's the kind of guy he is. And to be fair, the mayor, when this book was written, and honestly, when it was filming, John Lindsay, piece of shit, absolute scumbag piece of shit. And so that's an important thing to.
And again, I wondered if that was part of the reason we have such an absolutely inept garbage of a human as the mayor. I assumed that this was some type of commentary on the situation in New York. I wasn't alive and did not bother to go back and look that up, but I assumed that there was something there.
A 1993 survey of historians, political scientists, and urban experts conducted by Melvin G. Hawley of the University of Illinois at Chicago ranked Lindsay as the 16th worst American big city mayor to have ever served between the years 1820 and 1993. 16th worst mayor ever. So, are you familiar with Frank Serpico?
I recognize the name.
So Frank Serpico was one of the dudes who did whistleblowing on police corruption in the 60s and 70s in New York, and like famous movie Serpico based on his life starring Al Pacino, also a very cool movie from the 70s. Like a cool guy, but like, so that's the guy who was in charge of New York City when this book and movie were being made. So yeah, I think they're pretty much taking pot shots at how he's a terrible human.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
But anyway, to finish our synopsis, they get the $1 million. They take it down to the guys in the train. Some shootouts ensue. A couple people get shot, but they're able to get the money. They then, because Mr. Green, the guy who used to work for the subway, understands how the trains work, and understand they have a dead man switch at that time. Like the conductor has to hold down the switch for the train to move at all times. That's how the trains worked back then. But they have figured out a contraption, a doohickey, if you will, that they will be able to set up that will just let the car run without anyone in the box. So they climb out, they set this doohickey up, and get the car train car rolling. And they then go to sneak out of an emergency exit. Meanwhile, they can see, as you said, on the boards that the train is moving now. And so they start trying to chase to where the train is going to get to the end. And none of the, stops have been turned on because they were told that if they turn the stops on, that they would start killing the passengers if they did not let the train just go. But the detective puts this all together in his brain, figures out they have to have gotten off the train somehow. And so he goes to try to find the emergency exit closest to where the train had like moved to and stopped for a minute and then started moving again. In the meantime, all of the thieves have left the train. They have swapped their disguises. They all pull off their fake mustaches and turn their coats inside out and trade out their hats to try to look different. Mr. Gray refuses to surrender his Tommy gun, his automatic rifle. So Blue just shoots him right in the chest and says, okay, start picking up the money. And so they take all the money out of his pockets, shove it into their own pockets. And as they're getting ready to do this, it's important to note a thing I did not mention earlier. There was an undercover cop on that train car with them. And so when the train started moving again and all the dudes had gotten off of it, he leapt out the back, hurt himself, like jumping onto the tracks, but was like, I got to try to stop them. And so he'd crawled his way forward, pulls out his hidden gun, and shoots Mr. Blue in the back. He goes down. Mr. Green takes off running, and Mr. Gray, the main dude, or not Mr. Gray, Mr. Brown is the one who gets shot. Mr. Blue goes to find out what's happened to Mr. Brown, finds the cop, gets in a shootout with the cop, and right as he has gone over to kill the cop who has hurt himself and is laying on the tracks, that is when Lieutenant Zachary Garber shows up with his gun out, and Mr. Blue puts his hands up and, in a fairly gruesome scene, decides suicide is better than jail and touches both electrified rails simultaneously and fries himself to death.
Yep. Sticks his foot over and touches that third rail that we've heard a couple times as people were moving down through there. They've made sure, and so I thought that was good. They preface that. They say a couple times, don't touch the third rail. Don't touch the third rail.
Yep. He does it and kills himself. And so then they know now none of the 3 dead hijackers was a motorman. None of them were the guy who was clearly the guy who knew how these trains worked. So because Garber infers...
Mr. Green stuffs the money in him from Mr. Gray, gets that, and then he bolts. He goes. He
books it. And then is when Garber goes down, is after Mr. Green has gotten out. So Garber is able to infer it's got to have been a motorman who got fired. So they work their way through a list of recently discharged motormen, and they eventually make it to the door of Mr. Green, Harold Longman. After he hastily hides all the money, which he had been, of course, because why wouldn't you, throwing on his bed and leaping about in his underwear on top of the piles of money. He hides the money, bluffs his way through talking to them, is very indignant. How dare you suspect me? Blah, 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 blah. And then they don't have a warrant. They just showed up to his house. So Garber says, I'll be back with a warrant because, Longman's like, get out of my house, get out of my house. And at that moment, Longman sneezes and Garber says Gesundheit, which we have noticed throughout the movie. Mr. Green had been on the radio with Garber multiple times and had sneezed every time. And at that moment, he hears the sneeze, and then Garber reopens the door and gives a famous Walter Matthau stare. And that is how the movie ends, because he's like, "No, I got you, bud. They know coming back from this." And that is where the movie ends. So you didn't care for this movie very much, it sounds like.
Again, there were definitely parts of it I liked. I liked Walter Matthau's performance. He was the standout for me. Unlike you, I didn't ever really feel that Mr. Blue was that menacing. I did laugh at myself at one point when Garber gets off of the mic with him and says something about a heavy British accent. I'm like, no,
it's not a heavy British accent to me.
That is not a British accent at all. Like, it is not even close. But so that was the thing, is there were parts of it that I enjoyed. I never felt the tension that I wanted to feel from the situation, because in the situation, you should feel tense about everybody. How are the bad guys trying to get away? What's their plan? There were just so many different things. I mean, the people on the train, when they turn off the power in the subway, that's the first time they freak out. They don't even freak out when they realize that they're being hijacked by men with automatic rifles. And it really, that, again, that was one of my other notes, is I'm like, they freak out more when the power gets turned off than when four dudes disconnect, decouple the rest of the subway train and are standing there taking them hostage. So there were a lot of places where, for me, I felt like I wanted to feel that tension build, and it just wasn't very effective at that. And so that, I think, was the biggest thing that held me back.
I do feel like that's intentional, that thing about no one really giving a shit till the power goes out, because I've watched other movies from the 70s about New York City. That's the attitude of people in the 70s in New York City. They're just like, yeah, man, this shit, same shit, different day. This is just what happens, man.
And I can see that, because I had read some things as well where that was one of the things that they were embodying, was this idea that, New York in the late 60s and 70s might as well have been hell. And
it was like a post-apocalyptic city.
Yeah. So I get that. But what it did for me is, I think it took away some of that potential tension. And I don't know. And that was, I think, where I felt the most frustrated, is I never felt the tension building the way I wanted to. And I had a hard time pinning down, why did I feel that way? I think that Mr. Gray was just he was the one who was kicked out of the mafia, and they make some comment about that. He was so cartoonishly bad and evil. The one thing that he never did that I just kept literally waiting for was him to start twirling his fake mustache. And there's one thing at the very beginning where he very lasciviously licks his lips slowly at some girl who was on the train. And so he felt just like a bad caricature of a bad guy. Mr. Brown, again, it felt so literally the only character trait they gave him was his mild, very mild stutter. And then you had Blue and Green, and I don't know. It just, like I say, that was where I felt disappointed. I felt let down, is I kept looking for a lot more tension that I wanted to feel, and I wasn't feeling it. And so I think that's where I was disappointed with it.
That's fair. I do regret to inform you, Robert Shaw, who played Mr. Blue, is a Brit. He's from Lancashire, England.
That's amazing, because
he sounds like an American doing a terrible British accent.
He does. That's exactly right. Like, it sounds like I couldn't tell for sure what kind of accent he was going for until Walter Matthau, until Garber says, he's got a heavy British accent. And I was like, oh, that's what he's going for.
Yeah, he was born in Lancashire, England. And
Well,
here's another thing that's important about him. I didn't realize this until right now, looking at his Wikipedia page. You will have seen him in another notable 70s banger. He plays Quint in Jaws.
Huh.
Yeah.
Is this where I admit that I've never watched Jaws?
Dog, you've never seen... Okay, we should watch Jaws, because you know what's a good movie? Jaws. It is Steven Spielberg's second or third best movie. It's real good.
So I'm looking at this cast because I hadn't really looked at it. I mean, I knew it was a little weird seeing Jerry Stiller as Patron, like trying to take him seriously
it's Stiller's dad.
Right. And I'm like, oh, and he's not supposed to be funny. He's like one of the cops. He's one of the, and so, you know, but I had no idea. I would have never guessed that Mr. Gray was Hector Elizondo.
Yeah.
I did not realize that. And Mr. Green, I kept thinking, I knew it wasn't, but I kept thinking, I'm like, he kind of looks like, you know, Wish version of Ernest Borgnine.
He does kind of look like Timu Ernest Borgnine.
Yep.
That's rough.
That was the other one that I was like, and then, you know, you got Dick O'Neill, who is just, and again, I think this is something, I think this is part of the potential commentary that's embedded in the movie, which I applaud the movie and probably the book again for doing this. Mm-hmm. But you've got the guy who's in charge of the trains, and he could not give less of a shit about this. All he cares about is he's just yelling at Garber over and over again. He's like, oh, gotta get my trains going. And like, that was probably honestly my favorite scene of the entire movie is when Garber grabs him by the shirt and like gets up in his face and then like chucks him down, knocks him down, and is like, basically, yo, bitch, I'm taking care of a job here, like GTFO, and like chucks him down. That was my favorite scene of the entire movie, is where I was like, oh yeah, you go. I kind of wanted him to punch him in the dick, but we didn't go that far in the 70s, I guess, but that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah. That's fair. We don't need to talk anymore about it, other than you can say maybe don't watch it, and I'll say I think you should watch it.
Here's the thing though. I wouldn't say maybe don't watch it. I would say know what you're getting into, and I think it was interesting. I don't regret watching it at all. So while I didn't come away from this going, I don't want to watch the 2009 version, I don't want to watch the 1998 version, I'm good. At the same time, I can see some of the things that it's doing and respect what I think the movie is trying to do, at least, even if in some ways it fell down for me and wasn't fully successful. But I definitely don't think that I would say it's not worth watching. Based on what I've read, I would say if you're going to watch one of these, this is probably the one to watch.
I mean, it's pretty good. If you're going to watch an old 70s movie about how New York is a failed state, it's a pretty good one. And there were a bunch of those. You know, the Wikipedia says the film was one of several released that year that gave New York a bad image, including Law and Disorder, Death Wish. We all know Death Wish. Our father loves Death Wish. Serpico, about the aforementioned Frank Serpico, and The Super Cops, which is not a movie I have ever heard of. Looks terrible. Vincent Canby, another critic for the New York Times, wrote, New York is a mess, say these films. It's run by fools. Its citizens are at the mercy of its criminals, who, as often as not, are protected by an unholy alliance of civilitarians and crooked cops. The air is foul, the traffic impossible, services are diminishing, and the morale is such that ordering a cup of coffee in a diner can turn into a request for a fat lip. And I'm like, give me more of that. I want to see that. That sounds great. I want the world to look like a post. I feel like I live in a cyberpunk dystopia, so let me go back to the 70s pre-cyberpunk dystopia, please.
That's true. And
yeah, I had a very good time. I just think I just think the 70s is when film was at its best. And I know that's like an old head thing to say, but like so many of my favorite movies are all from the 70s. And there are so many reasons why I think that era of film works in a way that later eras don't, because there's not as much of a focus on the blockbuster. There's not as much of a focus on the studio machine. It is this weird liminal space. Like the studio system of the 30s, 40s, and 50s had fallen apart and had not reconstituted itself in the summer blockbuster, which is what we see from the 90s forward. You know, I like a lot of those big summer blockbusters. Jurassic Park is one of my all-time favorite movies, but also the damage that Jurassic Park has done to cinema is incalculable, because once that happened, everybody wanted 4 Jurassic Parks a summer. And that's just not what cinema was from the 60s to the 90s. And so I just find an electricity in that era of cinema where it felt like people could do things that you didn't see in movies before and that you would never see in movies now. And I think that from reading about what happens again in the 2009 version, which I bet is pretty good because Tony Scott directs it, and you know, he's a pretty fucking good film director, was Tony Scott. So I bet it's good. But like, I know it ends in a much more bombastic way, a much more like action-packed way than the 74 film does, because that is both the studio and the audience expectation of a movie in 2009 is for there to be a huge action set piece at the end of the film. But that's not what the expectation was for these types of movies in the 70s, where it was trying to be like a gritty drama with some, you know, exciting bits in it. And I just find it appealing. I just really enjoy watching a movie that doesn't feel the need to bombard me with special effects, but also doesn't feel the need to paper over the realities of life and things like that, which is what I would have seen in earlier cinema.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. It's
just kind of my sweet spot for watching movies. But I think we'll wrap it there. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, feel free to rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. Again, if you're listening on Overcast, it cuts out all of the dead space that Jeremy puts in. So you don't need to hear his non-speech. But we will be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. And until then, take care of yourselves.
Bye.
And you should participate more, Jeremy.
Damn it, that's right.